everyone. Thank you for joining. We're excited. As you can see, we have a very qualified panel, so I'm personally excited to hear. Today, we're going to really talk about the power and impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion on organizations. So what we want this to be is practical examples, experience from their C-suite perspective, so that you actually have some meat you can take back to your organization and work with. So I'm going to start. Ron, I'm going to ask you, each of you, to just do a quick introduction. So Ron, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Annette. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you for the producers and everybody put this together. My name is Ron Guerrier. I'm the global CIO for HP. You probably know the brand, based in Palo Alto. And I've been in this role for 2 years, and I'm excited to add some and contribute to this discussion.
All right. Liane, how about you?
So I'm Liane Hornsey. I also work very close to Palo Alto networks in the Bay Area. I've done what I'm doing for probably about 30 years. And I got to say, 30 years ago, what is now diversity, inclusion, equity was a huge passion of mine, huge passion. And it's been amazing, literally amazing to watch the agenda just become more and more important and more fundamental to business. So I'm really looking forward to this panel.
All right, thank you. Graciela, how about you?
Hello, Graciela Perez, and I'm the Chief Digital Program Officer and Executive Lean Leader at GE Healthcare. And just so excited to be here. STEM in general has been a big passion of mine. I've been working with the Women Tech Network now for 2 years, and I'm so excited to have GE Healthcare as one of 2 headline sponsors. And so diversity, inclusion, equity play a big role in our organization. If you think about over 70% of healthcare providers are women, and if we're not inclusive of women within our technology, then we're missing out on opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so I'm going to ask questions. We're going to kind of go around. I might put you on the spot. We want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think we can learn from our mistakes as well, right? So the first thing I want to ask is, what lived experiences do you have personally that maybe you've shared with your company or has helped you in your role with your company? So Ron, do you want to start off with us?
Yes, usually it goes ladies first, but I guess I'm the standout a little bit. I'll do that. So for me, prior to HP, I was a CIO at Toyota Financial Services, Farmers Insurance, Express Scripts, and here at the state of Illinois, I was the CIO for Governor Pritzker here. And so for me, just to 25 years in IT, I've always, being a person of color myself, always felt that I need to make sure that I bring up my peer group. I bring up women in tech is super important. And at one point, I remember there was a challenge where we were all huddled one time at a CIO conference in LA, and we're like, what can we do better? A bunch of CIOs got together, and we started a nonprofit called STEM Advantage. And the point of this was to encourage underserved communities and women to pursue careers in tech. And so instead of just sitting on the sidelines and going, woe is me, why is this so difficult, whatever, was why don't we just jump in, both feet in, and how do we create a situation where we create sponsorships, internships, and hopefully jobs. And one of the best stories I have is one of the young ladies that I helped sponsor and mentor. She eventually joined SpaceX as a data scientist. But when she started, she didn't have the confidence. She felt no one's going to listen to her. And today she's doing great things, putting people in space. And so for me, that's just one of those examples where instead of sitting on the sidelines, let's jump in and do something about it. So that's one of the things that helps shape who I am and how I think on a lot of things.
All right, that's great, because we talk about power and impact, and that's both. That's both that you've had not only on people, but organization as well. Liane, how about you? Anything personally for you that, I know you said you've had a passion for 30 years, which is amazing, because I think sometimes this is a very new area for people. So I'm going to love to have that expertise, but anything from you?
Yeah, there is something that I've shared with the company, and it does help me understand this whole agenda, and it gives me passion. I grew up in a very working class family. I was white, but my family were Irish, and in the UK, that's really not a thing. White Irish Catholic is, it's not a thing. And I just happened to be very smart. And I was sent to a school for sort of bright children. And I didn't have a uniform. I didn't have any money. I had the most appalling accent, and all the other children didn't. And I remember at the age of 11 going through exactly what it felt to be an outsider. And, you know, I've told people when I talk about diversity, I actually could change my voice. I talk like this because I went through elocution lessons at the age of 11 to change my accent. People of color, people with different genders, sexual orientation can't. And it was that moment where I felt like an outsider and I could do something. I could emulate, that made me realize just how hard it is when you can't, and actually that you shouldn't have to, because the pain I went through to try to emulate was ghastly for about 18 months. And so one of the reasons I'm so incredibly passionate about diversity is I actually, a little like Ron, actually think much about diversity is about social inequality. And I too do a lot of work in the social inequality space for children from the age of 16 through 18 to try to get them into college. I actually think that if we could work with social inequality, we would solve so many issues. And this is too new to too many companies. That's my feeling.
We're going to share in the comments in your chat, you know, the difference between equality and equity, because I think that is a very big distinction. So we're going to share a couple of graphics that will help you kind of see the difference of that. All right, Graciela, I want to ask you specifically about maybe product design when it comes to DEI and maybe an impact that might have had with external customers or even internal, you know, AHA experiences.
Yeah, you know, and as I mentioned in the beginning, and by the way, I'm just so inspired by Ron and Liane's examples, and I hope everyone joining us today is also inspired. Because we're in healthcare, and you know, large percentage of our customers and the people who work within healthcare, inclusive of our customers as well as our patients that we serve, if we don't have that representation within our customer from a design, within our company from a design standpoint, we're really missing out on that opportunity for key people, from developers to architects to product managers and even for C-suite decision makers to really make good decisions based on the knowledge of empathy, being able to empathize with our customers. And so within our products, we use a lot of artificial intelligence, and just being able to understand anatomically the differences, the subtle differences between race, gender, things that actually can change over time, for example. Understanding that as a developer in the AI space is really critical. Those nuances, we call them artifacts, data artifacts, and having that knowledge is super critical. If you just have people who are either binary or very, they think in one direction only, then your products are going to reflect that direction. And so the importance of inclusion and diversity in product design cannot be underestimated. And we see that if you look at our GE products in the medical space, we have, for example, a newer product design where we're actually increasing the opening of a space into an MRI machine. This is a magnetic resonance imaging machine. And just understanding that people don't come in one size. And having that flexibility and that capability has completely changed the face of MRI. So that's an example of someone saying, you know, that doesn't really accommodate the general population. You can do that based on data, but it takes people within your design team to really make those decisions. And then obviously also to be inclusive from the C-suite onward, because the funding decisions come from our C-suite. So they also have to be on board with that decision making. So just, you know, diversity and inclusion across from the sharp end to where the folks who hold the budget, super critical.
Well, and Anna, I know, is taking a note on new topic would be AI bias, maybe, and DEI. So we're setting ourselves up, guys, for another panel. Yes, those are really, really interesting discussions to have, because there is really an investment. A company has to invest in those areas and to see the return, but I think that's very important. All right, so I want you to think about your early career self. So, think back about that. I'm sure, for some of you, that was just a few years ago. With respect to just leveraging DEI to your advantage, what would you tell that early self? So I know Liane's kind of shared a little bit about that, which was great. Ron, Graciela, anything from you? Just what would you tell your early career self in respect to leveraging DEI?
Ron, I'll let you go first.
Yeah.
Gentlemen
Ron,
first.
Yes, Ron, and you're on mute, Ron. So if you'll unmute for us.
Absolutely. I'm trying to make sure my dog's not barking while. His name is Mojito, by the way. So if I said Mojito, be quiet. It's not.
Okay.
Okay.
You're not drinking during our panel, right? Okay.
Coffee. So for me, what I would tell my earlier self, there's many times, and I think all the ladies on this panel and everyone listening to this have those moments early in your career where you're like, did that just happen? And for me, it was either me being a keynote, but people assuming I am the coffee guy, or someone handing me a valet while I am not the valet guy. A couple cases, and 2 cases specifically, security was called on me because they assumed I just happened to be in the wrong place trying to get free food. And I was a CIO at the time, first time being a CIO. So those early moments, I go back to what my mom would tell me, is like, process and use it as a learning moment. And so what I've always learned from those moments in my career is like, how do I ensure this does not happen again? And everyone in the room understands to be completely inclusive of everyone that's around them. I think that's so important. I could have reacted poorly. I could have taken the valet key and throw it out the window or throw it in the bushes, but I use it as an education moment. No, I happen to be a peer of yours. I am the keynote speaker, and I'm on stage with Benioff in about 10 minutes. Hopefully you like it, right? So how do you find those opportunities to teach? So that's what I would do. And the other thing I'd do earlier in my career is join the ERGs in the companies, our employee resource groups. Early on, I said, no, I want to get it on my own way, right? And later, when I joined Farmers Insurance, for example, I started the Black ERG at Farmers, but I want to make sure that our marketing team would leverage the ERG when they're looking about marketing to African Americans, for example. How do you create the ERG to have a business value impact as well? So those are the things I would have done probably sooner in my career, but those learnings, those experiences, hardened me a little bit, but also said I need to do something different. And it was a learning opportunity for those around me.
Well, and I love, because it sounds like you were building a bridge from an experience in inviting people over, as opposed to creating, just another issue or another point of contention. So I love that, how you described that. I pictured just you build a bridge for people to cross over. Correct. I love that. Graciela, how about you?
Yeah, I echo Ron's sentiments in terms of people asking me early on who I supported, and just assuming that I was at a certain level just based on my looks, so to speak. I can't tell you how many times. Oops. I'm in a room that I think has a light that's on a timer. Uh-oh. There we go. Let there be light. The reality of live. And so I can't tell you how many times people come to me and ask me to cut my hair. At your level, you really need to, you can't have curly hair, which is indigenous to who I am, right, as a Hispanic. And so curly hair. And so I think being aware, if I was going to tell my early self something, it would be to be very secure in your brand. We have a number of really great sessions during this conference. And when I attended last year, what really struck me is how strong and how many opportunities, how strong the speakers are here, but also how many opportunities there are for those of you in attendance to learn about branding. And sometimes there's executive presence sessions as well that you can learn from, but finding something that resonates with you, find a brand, be very secure, because when people unnerve you, and you can see that in Ron's example, Ron, they didn't like completely push you over. You had that foundation you had, and they can call you valet or whatever. But if you're strong in your brand, you just look at that and say, no, that's on them. I'm good with myself. And so what I encourage everyone to do is take that time, regardless of where you are in your career, to understand your brand, be comfortable with it, and then flaunt it. Flaunt it.
Annette, may I just add to that? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I would just love to add to the piece of advice you've just been given. One of the things that I think is so critical is, and I feel this for women very strongly, be who you are and build on your own personality. I watch so many women and people of color trying to be something that they are not. And that will equal disaster and failure because it saps the energy to be constantly pretending. And, you know, I learned with that example of the elocution lessons, just jolly well be who you are, understand yourself, understand your own personality, and then build your brand on that. So many women become too aggressive in business because they try to emulate aggressive men. Not a thing. And actually very, very bad news. The absolute thing you should do as a young person is find out exactly who you are, and then be comfortable with that. And to use the word brand that. Don't change who you are, but build on your own foundation. Otherwise, you will be de-energized, you'll be exhausted, and you will be unhappy. I think that's the most important thing.
Well, and I love that you use the analogy of brand, because let's just think about that. When a company brands itself, if the customer or potential customer doesn't get the brand, they don't just go, okay, let's change our brand. We're going to be something else. What do? They go back to strengthening their brand. How do we strengthen our brand? How do we get somebody to build in and buy into our brand? And so I love that you guys have used that analogy about brand.
I just want to share a quote that I often use. It says, and I always say, be yourself, everyone else is taken.
I love that.
I do love that. So one thing that about diversity, equity, I really personally feel you can have the most diverse board, you can have the most diverse C-suite, but if you don't have a culture of inclusion, it's really hard to have any kind of sustainability in that change that you're trying to make. So I really want to talk a little bit about how do you drive inclusion inside an organization, because that's where I see things fall apart. You work really hard, you get diverse people, and then you sit in a room and, whether it's, somebody that identifies, transgender, maybe it's a, of color, it's a woman, it doesn't matter. If they don't feel like they have a voice, even if they're sitting at the table, you're not going to have power and you're not going to have effective change. So what do you guys do to really drive inclusion in the workforce? Ron, let's start with you.
Okay. So there's several things, but I do believe it is tops down, but it also is grassroots. I think it's everyone all in. And so for me, I always have these meetings. So I'm fortunate to be in the role here at HP, and I love it. Very inclusive organization. But I'm also on the board at Equinix, a publicly traded company. And I see it there as well. And what I always do is there's always a prep for a meeting. I'll give an example. There's a prep for a meeting. Everyone's excited. Let's prep for the meeting. And everyone's in the conversation. And then everyone gets into the boardroom where there's other execs. And all of a sudden, I saw this early in my career, some of the ladies and some of the diverse candidates were wallflowers. For some reason, they didn't feel that they were authorized to speak. They created this, this halo, this stopping point. And I always, I caught wind of that early on because that was me at one point. And I always made sure I would call them out. Like, what do you think about this, Lisa? Or, hey, in the prep session, Jerome, you had this great idea. Could you please share that with the group? And when I became in a leadership role, I encouraged it in real time to call out. And I'm telling them in advance, be ready. I might throw you a softball or a T-ball question in the room. I want you to show your value. I know I'm the leader in the room and I'm the kind of the spokesperson, but I can't do this without you. I need you to be present, right? And be prepared. And so for me, it was always, how do you do that? Enrique here at HP, our CEO, does it each and every day. So I think you have to encourage it. The other thing I'll quickly say is I've moved meetings around. We used to always have stand-up meetings. Those were doing agile scrum teams, early morning meetings. And I started realizing that some of our females were not making it, or some dads were taking kids to school. So I scheduled those meetings a little later in the day, because I don't want to make sure it can be an option, take my kids to school or join the scrum meeting. Why can't I move the scrum meeting? So I try to find ways to make it more inclusive and make sure the time is available for everyone. But for me, it's an active, always aware, always listening, always trying to bring in the best of everyone. And so for me, that's kind of how I process it. And I encourage that amongst my teams as well. So, hey, what is everyone thinking? Bring them into the room. And I always quote Hamilton. I've seen it 12 times in play. I want to be in the room when it happens. And you all want to be in the room. Now you're in a room. You are required to be contributors to that discussion.
That's great. And you're just reinforcing their value in your organization. I love that. Graciela, how about you?
Hey, I really, I'll capture one of Ron's, his excerpts, and this can't be a one-off where you check the box on, okay, I was inclusive that one time, and you write an inclusive email to everybody. It's got to be habit. And so for those of us that typically are in the C-suite, we've done this through habit. We have certain habits that have worked well for us. And so having the habit of inclusion, it just becomes, being healthy versus dieting, right? Being healthy just becomes your way of life. And inclusion really needs to be just that. So it's not a something, it's just the way we operate. And so I kind of have this scan that I do when we have meetings in terms of always looking for fresh eyes. And do we have fresh eyes in the room? Because we often get tied to this either groupthink or the way it's always been done. And fresh eyes could be early career, it could be mature, it could be lots of experience, it could be external experience, so you can leverage that. And so looking for the fresh eyes in our organization brings that inclusion, and there has to be at the basis of that psychological safety. So we do have organizations where you can include, and Ron, your example of women on the board, but if there's not that psychological safety, encouraging people to step forward, it's a face in the room versus really inviting that inclusiveness.
I love Margaret Buckley, who's in the chat, said that what she does is ask if anybody has an opposing view. So it's like that fresh set of eyes, but then asking people, that gives them permission to cause waves, because I think another issue is that as well. All right. So Liane, anything from you just on driving inclusion?
Yeah. I actually think it goes way beyond meetings, way beyond meetings and way beyond the C-suite. So I actually do think inclusion does not happen naturally. I think people are not inclusive, and you should start with that assumption. You should start with the assumption that people gravitate towards people like them. And therefore, inclusion has to be worked at. It will not just happen. It will only become habit if you've worked at it at grassroots. Yeah. Two things I believe, and two things that we do here at Palo Alto Networks. One, I believe inclusivity is not a diversity issue. I think it's an individual people issue. You have introverts who are white males. You have introverts who are Asian males. You have different personalities. Organizations need to take responsibility, and they don't, for understanding that every single employee is different. Every single employee, we might all be women, we might all be men, we might be all people of color, but we are different within that cadre, that community. And I actually think that employers have got this wrong. We have to understand that every single person is different and has unique needs at work. So one of the things we've done is we've introduced flex work. That applies to white men, Asian men, people of color, women, whatever. Anybody can flex work their individual time, because we all have different schedules. We all have different lives. We all have different needs. We have flexible benefits that are there for every single person who has different things going on in their lives. So inclusion has to start believing that every person is different and every person needs to be included. However, there are some communities that are less included than others societally. And for those communities, you need to give help and support and uplift. If I may, I want to share a story. I was at a company, not the company I'm at now, and it was the most interesting all hands I've ever been in my life. I have no ownership of this, I'm just sharing it. It was during Black History Month, and a young Black employee got up on the stage, and it was the most extraordinary moment I've ever had in terms of DEI. He stood there and he said, I've joined a tech company, and you expect me to talk in meetings. You expect me to come forward and act like you, those people of you that went to Stanford or wherever, those people who have lived the life from the age of 2 to be told to be trained to be a certain type of behavior. I've been trained all my life to put my hoodie up and say nothing and to keep my voice low because I'm Black. And you asked me to suddenly change my personality because I walk in through a tech door. You could have heard a pin drop in that all hands. There were thousands of people. You could have heard a pin drop because we all suddenly went, good gracious, we put these norms of behavior on people that it's not their norm of behavior. And until we understand that each and every person is different, but there are also communities that need support in different ways to be able to be themselves, we will not get DE right. We just won't. We have to do both things. And again, way beyond meetings. It goes into personal development plans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I could talk about this forever, but I think it's a really hard problem to crack, and we need to be extraordinarily conscious of it.
Yeah. Well, and what I predict is that all 3 of your companies are going to be inundated with people applying for positions because I think it is important for people to work. It's important for people to work for organizations that say what they mean and invest in those things. And so one thing I would tell people, if you're in an organization that doesn't value any of this and, you know, is a struggle, go find someplace to work. You know, there are incredible organizations, incredible leaders that are doing things. So, you know, and I think there would be a network of people to try to help you find that space that's right. So we probably, I don't know if we'll have time for more questions in this, but I do want to ask, do you see there's where social responsibility and community service, does that play a role in DEI? How do those connect? So, Graciela, I'll start with you this time. I've been picking on Ron.
Again, you know, coming from a healthcare company where we all have this incredible sense of purpose for our patients, being part of the community is vital. And, you know, just whether it's a donation of medical equipment or being of service within our community for our communities with care, it's super critical. And so, and then having that across, you know, across a spectrum of communities. So we're not, because there's, you know, health has no gender, it has no race. It's ubiquitous, really. And so when you are part of that greater whole, it makes complete sense to be entrenched. And you can go on our website and see the amount of not even actually just in healthcare, but across GE. We have our aviation and our power and our digital businesses, even outside of healthcare. I think the spirit of GE, if you think, a lot of people associate GE with refrigerators and washers and dryers and things like that, and being in people's homes, it's part of our GE culture, really, to give back and to resonate with our customers. And along with that has that responsibility of being inclusive across a diverse spectrum. Because if you think of your users, we're really talking globally around the world. Everyone at some point in their life has probably been touched by our GE products. So there's a huge responsibility that comes with that. And so it just, you know, it's really great. So one of the things that I want I'm looking at these great comments. Please keep them going. Looking at the comments from our audience, is that just having that sense of purpose. So whatever company you join, and certainly the companies represented here, you can sense a passion that we bring. If you don't have that within your company, go find a place where you have that purpose and you have that sense of capability of having a sustainable, the capability to have sustainability within diversity inclusion, and that you actually have a role in that. And so because we're out there and we want you. We want you to join us.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Ron, how about you? Just social responsibility, community service, and does that play a role in DEI?
Absolutely. And before I kind of give this answer, Liane's words are just lingering from the last. I mean, literally, it's one of those things is like, thank you, because you said it so eloquently the way you put that I just perfect. Like, and how do we build on that? So let's not forget what Liane said in that last question, please. Like, it's just there. But on this question, we do have a responsibility, I think, to be a lot more inclusive and diverse organization. We do have to invest in the communities around us. We have to reach out. And the thing about, there's 3 examples, and I'll provide examples here at HP that, part of this is a, recruiting pitch, hopefully. But one is, as an organization, partnering with the HBCUs is something, it's not cliche. We actually meet with them regularly. I meet with the CIOs, but we talk about how could we actually help them work on their curriculum. As a CIO, and I've been kind of in the game for 25 years, what are the skill set I'm looking for? And so what could, they could work on their curriculum. That's one thing. The second thing HP has done, which kind of blows me away, and I wasn't aware of it until I got to know our treasurer a little bit better. He invested and made major deposits in 2 banks, a bank in Detroit and a bank in Houston. And these were in black areas. And the idea there is just to put the deposits there. And so that money could be reinvested in the local communities. So it's a very intentional effort to invest in that community. And the third one is, for me, is a personal one. This one really hit home. So my parents are from Haiti. They migrated back in the late 60s. And so I go back to Haiti whenever I can. We all know the story of Haiti. It's proud. We kicked out Napoleon. We've paid for it ever since. And but the one thing that I'm proud of, when I used to go back to the island, we couldn't go on the beaches, right? It was so strewn with garbage and stuff. HP has a recycling center on the island, and ocean-bound materials are now used for the Dragonfly laptop that I'm using today. 60% of this laptop is made from the recycled materials from Haiti. And I actually found out on a recent discussion, I have a second cousin who works at that facility, and his job is, and he's creating a life for himself and his family that is just par none, something that HP is not only talking about it, they're doing it. And so those are the things that are super important. So yes, to answer your question again, community involvement, community engagement is so critical for D&I, because we all work in a bubble, and we got to get out of that bubble and see exactly what our work could do for the communities around us.
Yeah. I think it's how we learn. It's how we gain understanding. It's how we hear people's stories so that our perspectives change. I think, Liane, you had a great story of maybe how people's perspective will change when you're asking somebody to be different than who they are, instead of saying, help me understand who you are and what drives you and, how you operate. So I love that story. So,
And the
Liane,
storytelling really is what drives culture. It really is. And if we have old stories, it's never time like the present to actually create our new stories. And so if you feel like you're in a place where this you don't have that diversity inclusion now, start today, start at this moment forward, creating the new stories.
Okay, I have a question from the chat. What do you do when a society refuses diversity and inclusion and results lead to alienation instead?
I'm not sure. Can I just go back to the sustainability? And
sure, absolutely.
I just want to, before we answer that question, I just want to say one thing, just to echo what Ron and Graciela have said. Listen, every company that's any good does good things for their communities. End of. Companies that aren't good don't. And I'm sure we all do an array of things. The most important thing I truly believe about community giving, all of the masses and masses and masses of work we do is one, let our employees choose where they want to do good. Don't let the company tell them, and we do that. And two, it's a truth. When you do good for others, you feel good for yourself.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
let's not
Yeah.
underestimate the importance and the power of doing good. If
Yeah.
you think you're good people doing good things, you're going to be so much happier at work. So I don't care where you work, but work for a blooming good company doing good things for good people, right?
Yeah.
And in
And
terms
I
sorry.
do think that the society question, which is that's a big bite. I do feel like, starting where you are with what you just said in your organization, doing good where you can in your families, in your communities, I do feel like to bite, it's like drinking the ocean, right? It's like you got to start somewhere. And so I think maybe just where you are and what you have impact on, or go join those organizations that are doing good for good people. I love that.
And Annette, I think that kind of answers your question that you had, given to us, is that we all have choices. Be in a place where you can make a difference. We have, this limited time on earth. We have our energy being and our time being our most valuable assets that we have. Actively take control of that. Take control of your brand, where you put it, where you put your energy to use. And so if you're not in an environment where you with diversity and inclusion and equity, go find that place. I mean, you can see the 3 examples here where we have it and we have openings.
Yeah.
So
Well,
come join us.
there's so many people in the chat that say they work for great organizations. Go back, scroll up, and look who
Yes.
they are, connect with them. There's one other thing. We talk about the Great Resignation, and I hate when I see articles like that, because I feel like what's happening are people are leaving companies that don't serve a higher good, and they're joining people where they feel they have purpose. They're going to organizations that are getting it. So I feel like there's a transition of people that are going. So if you're a company that has a lot of people resigning, maybe that's a wake-up call. Maybe that's a wake-up call that you need to look at what you're doing.
Maybe to just go back to the question for a sec, if I may.
Sure, absolutely.
There are so many things that can make us all feel disempowered, sad. Every time I turn the news on, I almost want to cry. Every single blooming day. And I've gone through that whole thing in my life of, I just can't take this anymore. I can't take the pain. I can't take what I see. I can't take the bad stuff. I go back to what Graciela said. The only way through the pain in this world and the terrible, terrible things that we see on the TV every day is to do something yourself that makes you feel good. And it might be a tiny, tiny, weeny thing, but it's all you can do. It's all I've really learned all you can do is start where you are, to just echo what everybody else has said, because it's too exhausting and it's just too negative to think about the bigger picture and some of the terrible things that are happening.
All right, Ron, I'm going to give you a chance for any final comments. We're kind of coming to our time. So anything from you?
Oh, Ron, me?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
So for me, sorry, I was still mesmerized with the words of the ladies. So for me, again, thank you for this forum. Thank you for the conversation. And if I could double click on something Liane just said, it is sobering when you watch the news. It hurts. It honestly does. And so for me, everyone has moments in their life that kind of changes you a little. And I'll just give 2 quick examples. Here in Chicago at 16, unfortunately, I was a victim of a gunshot, and I lost a family member, and I witnessed it. And so for me, gun control is something that's always top of mind for me. And so I started partnering and doing a Guns for Sneakers program when I was in high school to try to get people off the streets, right? That was that one thing. And after the earthquake in Haiti, I lost 12 family members in that quake. One of them called me the night of the earthquake, and I didn't answer, and it's always resonated that, what if I answered? And so I'm now on a board called SBP, and we rebuild homes after natural disasters in the US. Those are 2 things, the trigger points, and there's others, we all have them, that made me say, okay, what could I do different and make a change? So I could change the news headlines to say, hey, here are the good things that are happening in this world. So thank you, Liane. I
That's-
just sparked that thought. I think we all could find those moments and those opportunities.
Mhm.
Well, it has been an honor to moderate this panel. As you all can see, Anna did a phenomenal job of pulling these three together with their experience. You have their links to LinkedIn bios, so please connect with them. And again, I'm going to end with somebody here in the chat said in their company, they are asked to do well and then to do good things and then do well, something like that. There's been so much interaction in there. So I love that. It is our kind of mission is to go out and, like Liane said, just do one thing that makes you feel good about what you're doing in your organization. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we look forward for more conversations in the future.
Great moderation. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Annette, Graciela, Ron, Liane. That was a fantastic panel. Excellent session. I think, I don't know, hundreds of comments, least to say. It was really hard to track. I will just project some of them. You just brought this really authentic selves to our conference. That's exactly what we're looking for. And I'm super honored to have had you today with us. And thank you so much for making time for this conversation, because our audience, women in tech and the tech world, needs such conversations. Thank you very much for being with us today. That was amazing. I don't know, hundreds of more comments are coming right now. I'm just
I know.
to project them
Phenomenal.
all.
Well, thank you, Anna. You're the one that put this together, so thank you.